I love Toby's memo because I think that it's always a good idea to clean out the cruft on a regular cadence and kind of reset the baseline because things build up over time. But I would also caution that, look, like meetings aren't inherently bad. It's just another way of collaborating with peers and making sure that you can get your work done. The question is, what are you trying to accomplish in it and who's the audience for it?
The outcome based pricing is interesting, but one of the problems there is because of non-deterministic nature of AI, the outcome is actually 95% or in some cases 80%. So it's like AI is always draft AI at this point. So like if let's say I'm writing a blog post, it gets me 85% there, but the rest of the 50% is where the SaaS is, where a good versus a great writer sort of differentiates it. So it's not really, outcome. The outcome is only for 85% of the outcome.
The Clockwise Fund goes all the way back to kind of a famous article by Paul Graham called Meter Schedule versus Maker Schedule. And the reflection in PG's article was that often inside software engineering organizations, the two modes of operation conflict. The managers control the schedules because they're setting kind of the cadence of meetings and sync stand-ups and meetings. And they get a lot of their productivity done in meetings. Whereas for makers, people like software engineers, designers, et cetera, they need large chunks of time in order to go heads down on a project and get in flow to be able to tackle things. And so the first thing I would observe is just that different people have different demands on their schedule. And so there's not really one size fit all here.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Matt Martin. He's the co-founder and CEO of Clockwise, an AI-powered calendar assistant that helps create smarter schedules for individuals and teams. He was previously in engineering and product roles at Salesforce, IQ, Legal Reach. Clockwise is today currently widely used across organizations in different roles like engineering, product, sales, remote, hybrid, and they've been adopted by an impressive list of customers including Coursera, Instacart, Asana, Atlassian, and many more. I'm excited to have this conversation with Matt about meetings, optimization, off meetings, how are we optimizing productivity in a hybrid era, leveraging AI, and a lot more. If this is the first time you're listening to Startup Project, don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening to this. You can also follow us on Substack at startupproject.substack.com.
Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I think to get started, can you describe to the audience, what is Clockwise and how do your customers use Clockwise?
Yeah. At its core, Clockwise is a very advanced scheduling brain. So we connect to your calendar, whether that's Google Calendar or Outlook. You can use it as an individual. And we start to analyze your calendar when you connect it, understanding, what's the cadence of your meetings, when do you tend to work, what are your working hours, when do you like to take breaks, ask you a few questions to get to know you a little bit better. And then based on that information, we start giving you suggestions on how to optimize your schedule in order to have more time for high impact work. And where Clockwise kind of really hits its groove is when you start to use it among a larger group of people. So Clockwise can look at the interconnection between you, other attendees, their preferences, and how to optimize calendars holistically. And so we do this at scale for some of the best companies in the world, places like Netflix, Uber, Atlassian, where we help optimize almost the whole company, complete engineering departments, schedules in order to, again, give more time for high impact work, be able to meet with the right people, and be able to have a sane work life.
So, you are living in this world of calendars and meetings. And this reminds me of an instance, I think a couple of years back when Shopify CEO Toby sort of sent out this memo of like, you can cancel any meeting you want, and we want to reduce the number of meetings happening in our organization. What is your in general take of, what frequency or how many number of meetings that are happening in the company? Like, do you see high number, low number? What are the trends that you're seeing in terms of just how companies are optimizing their meetings?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, Clockwise founding goes all the way back to kind of a famous article by Paul Graham called Meter Schedule versus Maker Schedule. And the reflection in PG's article was that, often inside of software engineering organizations, the two modes of operation conflict. The managers control the schedules because they're setting kind of the cadence of meetings and sync stand-ups, one-on-ones, team meetings. And they get a lot of their productivity done in meetings. Whereas for makers, people like software engineers, designers, et cetera, they need large chunks of time in order to go heads down on a project and get in flow to be able to tackle things. And so the first thing I would observe is just that uh, different people have different demands in their schedule. And so there's not really one size fit all here. And I love Toby's memo because I think that it's always a good idea to clean out the cruft on a regular cadence and kind of reset the baseline because things build up over time. But I would also caution that, look, like meetings aren't inherently bad. It's just another way of collaborating with peers and making sure that you can get your work done. The question is, what are you trying to accomplish in it? And who's the audience for it? So I could talk about that for a very long time, but I would also know that there are some kind of um, almost gravitational forces when it comes to meetings. So one is that we've seen this in our data. The larger the company gets, the higher percentage of time people tend to spend in meetings. It just as you have more people in your orbit, the cost of collaboration and coordination goes up. And that tends to be true not just as you go from a team of 5 to a team of 50, but even going from a team of 5,000 to a team of 50,000. A company of 50,000, you hit a cap eventually, but the amount of time spent in meetings tends to go up. And then another thing that happened is it's a little bit in the rearview mirror now, but when COVID hit, the quantity of meetings spiked way up because I think as people went remote and hybrid, they were trying to figure out how to replace a lot of the content of an in-office environment with meetings. That subdued a little bit, but it never came all the way back down. So there's kind of an overhang from companies going remote. And I would say that even today, you do see some split between in-office companies and remote companies in terms of the volume of meetings they have.
Is there any interesting trend? Because one of the things that happened after COVID, for me at least, is there has been increase in the sort of non-scheduled meetings. So you just have a question and you just all get on a call spontaneously. It's sort of like replicating the hallway chat remotely. Like, do you have any statistics on like a spike in those and how they're doing right now?
Yeah, and that tends to be one of the sources of the split between remote and in office, because when you're in office, those conversations still happen. They just don't get recorded formally on the calendar. And so, if you're remote, you do kind of have to reach out. I mean, there are informal ways to do that. You can drop on a quick Slack huddle. You could, move some of that to Slack or asynchronous conversation, which is a good pattern. But one of the phenomenons is just that there's a shift in the medium. Instead of as you noted, instead of bumping into somebody in the hallway or going over their desk and chatting, you do have to find a Zoom meeting or schedule something on Google Meet in order to meet with the people. So that frequency goes up. I would say that the amount of time, though, spent in synchronous conversation, that actually doesn't vary as much with remote or in office, because it's just a different type of synchronous conversation. It's happening at your desk, it's happening in the hallway, it's happening in the lunchroom. But it depends a lot on the culture. At some place like Apple, where it's not uncommon for software engineers to have their own dedicated private offices, that sort of synchronous conversation in the office is much lower than a place that's just a wide open, open office environment.
So, before, I'm assuming, Clockwise started before ChatGPT and whole the LLM,
Yeah.
mania started, for lack of a better word. And it feels to me that there's now this rethinking in terms of, especially in organizations, about what type of tools we're adopting. And, a typical organization now, if 1,000-person organization might have like 100 to 200 SaaS products, right? And, Clockwise is one of those. And I think we are sort of seeing a shift and between how many products you're adopting. And then there's also like, how many things you could add to your own product. So if you're a Zoom, are you adding more features, that sort of overlap with other products? So there is also like more accelerated pace of launching new features. Do you see this happening in your perception of how the sales are going for your product or other products when you talk to other founders or customers? Like, is that this sort of change in narrative, or is it more of a narrative than it's real?
I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Zoom in the context here of kind of AI tooling and acceleration of adoption of feature set, because I think there's actually a more significant undercurrent that's not related to AI, which is the correction a couple of years ago now from a zero interest rate environment to an environment where money isn't free. Um, and that had significant impact to SaaS buying, renewals, adoption cycles, especially along with more mature organizations. We saw a huge wave of consolidation of tools, of removal of tools, of reevaluation of tools that we hadn't seen in the life cycle of our business before. And I think that, not to pick on Zoom, but their I would say that their proliferation of product development isn't downstream of AI, but it's downstream of that consolidation effort, because they saw, if you're just video conferencing software, it's a little bit easier to rip you out. I mean, everybody pays for Microsoft 365 for their basic email and calendar, or they pay Google for their basic email and calendar. And both those come along with video conferencing. And so what does Zoom try to do? They try to replace that Office suite. I it, it remains to be seen if they can be successful in doing that. But I actually think that that's the more significant trend. Now, when it comes to AI tools and adoption, that has been a bit of a resurgence and a correction in that downturn in buying. There's definitely been top-down appetite to find ways to add to the productivity and capacity of the organization with those tools. I will say, however, that the trying and retention is way different. I'm quite proud of Clockwise's retention. Like, people use it and they like it. But as I've talked to a lot of IT leaders, CISOs, other folks that are heavily involved in SaaS purchases, there's a lot of experimentation, but there's a lot of churn. A lot of these AI tools, they look interesting at the outset, but it's hard to measure what exactly they're contributing to the bottom line of the company. And so I bring all this up because it's kind of an interesting mindset where, you have the background of this massive constriction in what people are willing to spend for software, but then a real increase in experimentation of what they're willing to try. But I think some of that conservatism in terms of what they're actually buying is still there. It's not quite as severe as it was when, the zero interest rate bubble popped, but it's, people aren't just throwing money at the problem, even though it can feel like that sometimes.
I think because the reason I ask is there's also this hype around like what an AI agent can do, because every new AI agent platform sort of is offering things like, hey, you can optimize your calendar, you can optimize your productivity, you can increase your productivity, you can create an agent which sort of reschedules, or although like they're more non-deterministic in nature, they're not still yet accurate enough. So what's your view in terms of like, because a lot of what agents are promising are overlapping with, the example I'm giving is, I'm trying to correlate it to Clockwise, but even like other SaaS products out there, like someone says, we have a revenue agent to increase revenue, right? The problem I see is the form factor is not fitting with the promise, because when you get into things like revenue management or, stuff others, like where a CIO wants to see the number, they wants to see how the productivity change. And that's still not yet easily correlated, especially in this agentic chat-based form factors. So talk to me a little bit about that disconnect that we are seeing in terms of, what the AI agents are promising, and why is that disconnect even there?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a lot of this is kind of the basics of software selling that have been around for a while. They're ultimately, the buyer needs to see the case for the return on investment of the product. And I think the reason that there's so much hype around AI is that people have seen in various facets of their job the impact that it can have. And so they're looking and they're clamoring to find other areas where that application can be yielded. And there are some, but at the end of the day, if to your point, like if there's revenue acceleration, the CRO is not actually seeing that, well, they're not going to buy the software, whether it's an agent or a piece of SaaS. And in a lot of these areas, the efficiency gains are really notoriously difficult to measure. And, Clockwise, I think that we undeniably help people be more productive in their work environment. But our measurement problem and our ROI measurement problem has always been there. We're a piece of productivity software. So, we can tell you about all of the dedicated time that we put back in schedules. And to some extent, that's measurable at hard ROI. But some buyers look at that and they go, well, you know, okay, you made their schedule more flexible, but did they actually get more done? Um, and I think that's where, there is at the edge of some of these pieces of agent software, there are interesting new pricing models that are being experimented with. You see places like Sierra doing outcome-based pricing. So each ticket they take off of a customer service person's desk, that's what you're paying for. And that's much closer to hard ROI for the organization because you're actually offsetting, real employee time and salary in a very concrete way. I think it's difficult to find those measurables often, though. It's difficult to find that hard translation of outcome, and it's difficult to have accountability all the way back. So it's like so many things in the ecosystem right now. People are experimenting. It'll be interesting to see where it lands. But a lot of these problems echo through software sales, since the 70s.
The outcome based pricing is interesting, but one of the problems there is because of non-deterministic nature of AI, the outcome is actually 95% or in some cases 80%. So it's like AI is always draft AI at this point. So like if let's say I'm writing a blog post, it gets me 85% there, but the rest of the 50% is where the sauce is, where a good versus a great writer sort of differentiates it. So it's not really, outcome. The outcome is only for 85% of the outcome, right? So not all use cases can actually be measured by the outcome,
Yeah.
but it's more the pay as you go model makes sense for a lot of use cases.
Yeah, and that's where like outcome-based pricing is kind of the clearest from a buyer perspective, and I think it's in some ways the ideal paying mechanism because the buyer's just paying for what they want. But to your point, I think a lot of these software systems just can't be measured there, and so you see people fall back to usage-based because it's kind of a proxy for outcome. Kind of, if you're looking at coding tools like Claude Code. We rack up some bills even in our smaller organization on that for the usage-based pricing. And I squint at that and it doesn't bother me because in my head that correlates directly to developer productivity, but it is a correlation. It's not an outcome. And to your point, I don't think I'd pay Claude Code for, features shipped because like, I don't want to incentivize, Claude to crank out more features. And it would be difficult in, the software ecosystem to do something like, create a piece of software that drives increased retention. Like those are the outcomes that I actually care about, but that's a complicated system. So I think we're going to see a lot of people experiment with the different sort of models here, especially because with agents, the thing that has shifted is that a lot of what both the buyer and the seller want is to have the pricing based on replacement costs for employee wages, for better or worse. I mean, like everybody likes to dance around the fact that this might take over real human workloads, but like that's what people are really selling. And so if you can get to outcomes that actually yield that, then there's quite a bit of wiggle room to price that because employees are expensive. But it's nice if you can do it. I don't think that it applies to most pieces of software.
How are you leveraging AI in terms of like creating new features and products? Like, can you give me examples of how you're using AI within Clockwise as a product?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I'll answer in two ways. So first is kind of operationally, like how are we developing product? And the second is how is Clockwise's technology actually use AI? And on the first point, we're at this point, this sounds like I almost cringe at this term because everybody uses it, but I do think that we have a truly kind of AI native product development cycle where people are utilizing tools at every stage of the process in order to accelerate the results. And, one of the places that's of the most clear leverage to me is the collapsing of product research and prototyping. I have designers who are, literally spinning up their own prototypes, whether that's in Figma Make or it's in, V0 or if it's in Lovable. Like you can spin up a prototype that's interactive and put it in front of somebody, whereas previously, you would have done some user research sessions and some design sessions and maybe develop something, but it's quite costly. And there, it's kind of throwaway code. It'll help inspire the engineer for what to make, but like you can do it quickly and you don't have to worry about the bugs. And then that accelerates development cycles. And with all the tooling that we have, you can really spin up a lot of creative paths and experiment with what the best path is because you can get there faster. It still requires a lot of, a lot of people like to say they're, X% of their code is written by AI at this point. I mean, like it does require human review a lot of the times, or else you're going to create a really kind of hairy code base. But you really can accelerate your experimentation cycles. And then on the Clockwise front, like what are we actually doing with AI? I mean, there are multiple levels of this. I mean, so one is we have a product in the field right now that allows AI-based scheduling. So you can chat with Clockwise, and it'll you can say, hey, I want to schedule a time with Nikita, Aaron, and Joe next week. And we have our own fine-tuned model that we fine-tune to pay attention to time and time-based requests. So it can parse the intent of the user out of that and then give it to our backend systems to actually conduct the scheduling itself. We also have, and we're about to launch our own MCP server that connects up our scheduling engine to frontier models or whatever MCP client you might be using, whether that's Claude itself or Cursor or another CLI client. I'm sorry, MCP client. And so it's been fascinating to see, especially with MCP, the combinatorial power of having different tools that can be called into from a pretty intelligent base model.
Are MCPs just APIs?
They're kind of not. They kind of are and they kind of aren't. And like I say this not as like it's a very, very good question. An API embraces a transaction. You know exactly what the transaction that you're trying to yield is. MCP is really designed to give the base model a different set of tools. And like you can think of it as an API. I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, it is an application programming interface, but it's manifestly different how you develop it. And it's kind of interesting. Like you even in the way that you formulate the description of the tool can massively impact how, when, why, and where the base model will utilize it. And then and all the way down the stack, like error codes. Like when you have an error in API, you just return an error code so that the program can do something with it. Well, if you're in MCP world, you really want to return an error message that helps guide the underlying agent with what to do next in order to make the experience better. And you're shoving like a lot of context and information back to the base model instead of just discrete volume of data, because you're trying to empower that base agent with whatever they are requesting to use the tool for. And so like, it sounds kind of like a nuance difference, but in practicality, it's actually quite different than building an API or utilizing an API. And it's interesting. It is interesting. They are shadows of each other for sure. They're definitely related, but they're not the same.
Yeah, I was going through your some of your LinkedIn posts, and I think one of the things that you mentioned, I think you named a couple of tools, and you said that as a result, we are becoming babysitters for half-baked tools. What do you mean? What is the trend that you're seeing? Why are a lot of these tools working half-baked?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love this. Let's kind of go down this, walk through this door and go down this avenue of interrogation, because I'm so energized by what's happening in the industry right now, because I love experimentation. I mean, like part of why we all get in tech is like we like to make new things, and when you have an explosion of new technology, it's really exciting. But with that explosion comes chaos, and like people are trying out new things and trying to connect them. And so when you look at LLMs, the ability to call into other tools and to be able to utilize things outside of that LLM's training data set is very obviously a need. And Anthropic developed MCP, and I think it's an interesting, an elegant first attempt. But there is it's cumbersome. I mean, it is not for my mom, right? Like it's not for my wife, and she's very technologically literate. It's not for some people inside of Clockwise who aren't as technologically literate, because you have to interconnect these things. You have to know how to deal with them. The more tools you add, the slower the LM gets, the more complicated it gets. It's clearly not a pattern that will extend into infinity, but it is a jumpstart on experimentation. And so I think we're in this early phase where, in order to often getting a workflow completed in an AI-based way is more cumbersome than just sitting down and using a pre-existing piece of software. And I think some of the skeptics look at that and go, well, this is kind of all BS. Like, this is just like a more complicated way to do things we already know how to do. But the ability of the base model to intelligently reason and kind of navigate these workflows is transformational. It's just like, we haven't gotten there with the interface. We haven't gotten there with how we put those workflows together. We haven't gotten there in terms of the accessibility, approachability, and usability of those interfaces for the average user.
I think my take has always been, I think it's sort of like an evolution, right? Like when we first saw the base models, and ChatGPT sort of showcased the power of base models. And then a bunch of engineers who got access to base models were sort of like a V0 versions of everything. And that's been like past 2 years. And now you really have product thinkers or people who understand the market, are like use cases really, and they have to build the next generation of products targeting a particular set of use cases. I think that's sort of like where we are going next. And that's why I also feel like, people say we are over investing in AI. Yeah, it might be true on a longer basis. You can't really tell what is over investment and under investment. But the thing that you do know is that we are still early in terms of the apps that are leveraging AI. We are still very early in that form, because there is now an opportunity to rethink a lot of fundamental apps. Because, can you rewrite Outlook, with AI being first? Can you rethink? Because if you think about Notion, they rethought how a note-taking tool should be for the internet. Because Word was just adapted from a desktop era to the browser era automatically in the same form factor, and then Notion and some other tools sort of experimented with a different form factor for internet. Now, can you rethink even Notion with AI being in place instead of adding on top of AI? So I think there's a lot more experimentation, and I think it's a really good opportunity for people who have unique perspective of how a particular tool should be to experiment with. Like even Obsidian or tools like that emerge from the taking that I have a particular vantage point on how my internal knowledge structure should be, right? That's a specific point of view on how a tool should be. I think we have not seen that yet with AI. All we have seen is good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like we're definitely in the phase where there's a lot of bolt-on. There's a lot of looking at current products and asking, ooh, now that I have this additional technology, what can I do on top of this current product in order to augment it? And I think the note-taking example is an interesting one. I don't know what the future holds, but if you take Notion, for example, they've added on their own AI product. And it's interesting. It's actually, one of the more interesting ones that I've seen. But the frequency with which I use Notion's AI features versus Notion as just a note-taking tool, 100 to 1. I mean, like I don't use the AI that much. And so I think, if just to extend the example of note-taking, the future probably looks more like something that is an omniscient collection of information that you can query and talk to about surfacing the right information at the right time, rather than looking like, and Notion probably doesn't go away. I mean, one of the things that people often lose sight of is that most technology is additive. it's not that common that the old technology disappears. It does happen, but usually there's a new technology that is added to the ecosystem on top of the existing technologies. Like, when we got phones, we didn't get rid of laptops, or smartphones, that is. And so I think there's going to be an evolution around, that's in the future still, where they're starting to merge a completely new category, type, and feel of software that's emerging from AI. Whereas right now we're still very much outside the frontier models. I would say the frontier models are genuinely there. I mean, ChatGPT, Claude, these sort of things, they are genuinely new experiences. But for the verticalized and kind of specialized experiences, I haven't seen, I don't know about you, I haven't seen that many things that are, genuinely feel very new instead of augmentative.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite example is that the Zapier and the Enneken sort of products have become really 100x more powerful than they were because of AI. And you there's still a lot of difference between all these products if you compare Make.com or a Zapier. And there are some new tools, like we've had Relay's founder Jacob on here, and it's an amazing tool and saves you a lot of time. Then we have Lindy, which is targeting a different set of customers, which is similarly like workflow manufacturing tools. And my reasoning has always been like, if you're thinking about accomplishing a task from A to B, what used to be that the human in the loop intervention pre-AI was like, if you have to intervene 10 times, now you would have to intervene one time. And that's really very dramatically more powerful. And we're underestimating why that form factor is so powerful. Because think about like everything that we do on a daily basis, you can break it down into a workflow. And before, there was a decision-making intelligence that was missing. So we had to create a lot number of workflows. So, hey, take the email and put it in Excel was one workflow. But now I can just chain that workflow multiple times because the LLM is so good at 99% of times on basic linear tasks, and that makes Zapier a lot more powerful. And Zapier-like products like whether it's Lindy or Relay, extremely powerful. And I think we haven't even seen them being applied to specific categories. Like, Microsoft has something like Copilot Studio, which is built on this Power Apps ecosystem, which is like extremely powerful in the enterprise context. But if you take all that and give it in a personal context or like a marketing context, it can be a complete game changer. Like just looking at how many things you could do for just marketing in that workflow. And if you target specific use cases, like think about like what Canva did in creativity space, right? They targeted specific outcome. I'm not editing Adobe for editing Adobe. I just want to create an Instagram post or a LinkedIn post or based on an outcome-based use case and targeting your flow towards that particular outcome. And that's what these tools can do. So that's one of my favorite examples of like really AI-first tools. There's also a creative tool. I forgot the name. It starts with, I think it's called Fauna or Fiona, something like that. It's based on a New York startup. And they're also like completely rethinking how you can produce creative assets. And the form factor is very different than what I've seen. And it's not like just chat and, generate stuff, right? I think chat is in a way a little bit limiting as a form factor in that self. And I've seen a workflow-based, outcome-based targeting tools are going to, find their usage. And I've already seen, Lindy is pretty popular. I think they've scaled significantly. Relay also scaled to, I think it's at least 5 million ARR or something like that in a pretty quick time. And there are also these businesses now are coming into a category where they don't have to raise money, like after seed.
Yep.
And that's a phenomenon that we are seeing with these companies because they're now quickly gaining user adoption and gaining revenue enough that they don't actually have to raise money after like a $5 million round. They don't have to actually, raise huge rounds and it becomes a real choice where, what type of founder and what type of strategy you're sort of trying to implement. I think that is what is a thing, but they're really making enough revenue to sort of continue without fundraise. So if you miss the seed round, then you're probably not going to invest in that particular type of company. So that's also another interesting aspect of this.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a number of things there, and you do start to see kind of the different archetypes that are emerging, and who knows if this will hold true, but if I put on my kind of like forward-looking hat, it seems like there are a few different categories of AI companies that are in my mind likely to succeed and last. One of them is kind of the horizontal platform, the horizontal workflow platform, and you named a few. I know Jacob over at Relay; he's brilliant. Great company, super interesting stuff that they're doing, very powerful. Lindy, Zapier, there are a number of these, and I think those sort of tools have existed before, but they are as you point out, like they're on steroids because they have an AI decision making engine. And so I think that area is very interesting. But then to your point, there's also it feels like there should be an emerging category of verticalized solutions. And you see this a little bit. You do see this a little bit. There are places like, Writer.ai is obviously huge, and they have a number of verticals that they address, but they started mostly with marketing. You have Sierra with customer service that's very large. And you have others, there are places like Otter.ai or Granola. But I just feel like, specialized verticalized tools that are more custom UIs based on a specific workflow. So there's less upfront costs of starting up. There's more specialization. And I think in the middle of all this, there still will exist those primary agents or assistants. And I think my bet would be that there's going to be a split between the personal and the work environment. The contexts there are just very different. People right now default to bringing the agent that they like, usually ChatGPT, into the work environment because it's so accessible and they understand it. But if somebody succeeds, and everybody and their mother, including Microsoft, is seeming to try, but if somebody succeeds in making a really great one for the enterprise, I think that there's a million reasons why there's a different context. And there, a couple things. I mean, one, I think that those assistant, for lack of a better word, those assistant agents do have a permanent place because memory is so valuable. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but like ChatGPT tends to be my default. And the other day I was having an interaction where like I was asking about, I don't even know what the hell it was. It was like some smart light switch, and I was like trying to automate it, and is like, hey, you can't actually automate this, but I do know that you use Home Assistant. And so if you want, like, I could give you an automation inside of Home Assistant that can latch into this. I'm like, great, yes, do that. And it's just like these little moments where like it knows me and understands me, and so it can do that. And I think in the business environment, knowing the corpus of business data really accelerates things. But sorry for going on at length here, but the thing for those agents require interaction across other mediums. They're not quite like the workflow builders because you're not custom building a specific workflow, but they do need the ability to call into other tools, whether that's MCP or something else. What they don't have right now is any way for those third parties to provide customized experiences inside of the tools. And I think that that's missing still on those platforms.
I think you're absolutely on point. I think I had Arvind Jain from Clean in my last episode, and I was asking him because they're completely an enterprise ecosystem and building AI agentic search / ChatGPT for enterprise, basically. And his vision of future was pretty much the same, is that we'll have an AI assistant for your workplace, which is basically has all the memory, has all the interactions, has all the search, and it knows the recent meetings, it knows the real context of what you're talking about. And, you can just talk with it and chat with it anytime, and you get the most contextually accurate thing. And you can schedule tags, you can get things done. And obviously it's going to be voice, it's going to be audio, it's going to be available on your desktop, mobile, your Apple smartwatch. And where his view is we're going to, and obviously they are the company that is doing this, so I'm expecting them to do this. But I think you could also expect something like this from Microsoft. You can expect something like this from Google's Workspace, and Google probably would do this for personal layer as well, because they have the Android advantage there. And I think Apple will eventually get there by adopting some of these technologies where, and I think we'll also see more hardware form factors. And I think we would see if I have to predict, we will see a pen as a form factor, which is sort of like a listening device, but also like, it's sort of, you can hold your pen and record the meeting if you're a physical conversation. And then obviously we've seen some kind of like pebbles that you can wear on your neck. I'm not huge on that form factor, but then you also have integrations with your smart glasses. So your smart glass can also be that intelligence edge, device. So I think you'll see this work version and a personal version all on all devices pretty soon. I think Google will also try to come to the desktop with it. I think they have an experimental product in Google Labs that they're running, which is on Windows desktop. So you can just hit a key and basically talk to it. It's similar to like what Cortana used to do on Windows, but now it's being relaunched because now it has much more capabilities. The audio recognition is way more accurate and everything works way more better than what the previous versions of these products worked. So I think that's where we're going with this, future of work and future of, personal productivity. I think those product and those form factors are about to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time, right?
Yeah.
The thing that, in addition to everything you just said, one of the things that I'm really interested in where it heads is the UI layer itself. Like, I think that, because and now I am specifically talking about that category of kind of assistant, not necessarily the workflow builder, not necessarily the verticalized solution, but in that assistant mode, it is natural to text and talk. I have an executive assistant. We communicate primarily through Slack and email and voice memos. And so it's very similar modalities of interaction as you have with an agent. However, if, at the start of the day, she always sends me a screenshot of my schedule. If instead of doing that, she described it all, it'd be a worse experience. When she's booking a flight, she sends the final booking and she could transcribe that and explain it to me, but like, it's worse. Like, there's a reason that humans are visual animals. And like, of course, auditory is important. Of course, being able to type is important when you can't speak, but like, there's a reason that our phones always get bigger, that we get more pixels on our devices. Like, there is a lot of value to be added there. And I think my vision for this, and I'm not sure if it's right, truly, is that the primary mode of interaction for those assistant services does actually make sense as chat. I don't think that there's a different interface that's better than chat, but there are tons of opportunities inside that chat context to augment that with visuals or more interactive elements. And we already see that a little bit from Anthropic and OpenAI with canvases and artifacts, but like, I don't want the AI to generate HTML and CSS every time it wants to show me something. Like, I would rather have, delta.com, be able to shove in the ticket right into the conversation. And so I'm interested to see what happens there. I'm not sure where it's going to go.
Yeah, I completely agree on the visual medium part of it, because I think there were predictions even with Alexa or Siri that, audio is the next big platform. And I've never bought into that thesis is because of this reason, because audio is always augmentative in nature. It cannot be the main interface, and we grasp so much information visually, and audio is only when augmented is more powerful, versus audio alone is not powerful. And you can see that in basic consumption pattern, like people watch more videos than listen to podcasts. There's a reason why that is, because people are visual creatures. They're not audio creatures. If that was the case, then podcasts should get the same listeners as YouTube gets viewers. So, but it's not the case. So that's the simplest way to see why audio is never going to be the primary medium for.
Although I will push back here a little bit. I do agree with your general premise, but it's one thing that I think is important about audio is that we already have patterns of a bidirectional audio interaction, where bidirectional video interaction is right now the only analog is what we're doing right now, which is a video chat, which is just taking basically the same paradigm as audio and adding a video layer. There's not really, it's kind of wild to even think about, like, I guess a video game is like a bidirectional video to some extent, like you're navigating it. And the reason that I bring this up is because I think that I've had this conversation with several people where I do think that our conception of where we can use audio as an interface is a little bit tethered to the past failures of audio interfaces. There's something, I don't know about you, but like for me, there's something inherently so much different and so much richer interacting with ChatGPT's advanced voice mode than there is with Siri or Alexa, where like advanced voice mode feel like it plays an empathy trick with my little, mammalian ape brain, where it's like, it feels like I'm talking to something, like that we're having a conversation. And all of a sudden it feels natural to have a patter of back and forth that I would never have with Alexa or Siri. And because of that, it's actually, for some things, I mean, I agree with you, like visuals are necessary for a lot of things, but for some things, it's a really powerful interface.
And I already noticed that, like, if you're in your bed, you're just winding down for the day and you have really a question or thought that you want to, ask ChatGPT, and you almost go towards the audio version of interacting with ChatGPT and not the chat, because then you have to put more senses, even though because you're winding down, right? It makes more sense that I click and just ask it rather than like I look and I write, and then you have to engage more into it. So
Yep.
I definitely see the point that you're making. It's in certain instances, audio makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and I think that's where the real-time models, which are relatively new, but that's advanced voice mode, is real-time, where it's not doing, when LM's first released, OpenAI famously has Whisper, which is an incredible transcription API. And so they were using voice to transcription into the text model. But the voice to voice, the real-time models are actually taking voice right in the model. And it allows you to interrupt the agent and to have a back and forth. And so like, I find that makes a difference in that I will use the voice for more exploratory thoughts, because I don't yet have I don't have the structure to write it down yet. So like, I will often sit and like dictate and like bat something around with it, or a weird example is like, I have been reading the Dune books for the first time, and I'm on book 5, and it's like, what the hell is happening? And like, I'll literally like talk to the agent and be like, okay, I'm on book 5, don't spoil anything, I'm not past it, but like, why the hell is he all of a sudden a worm in real life? Like, it's you can like explore a topic in a way that chat wouldn't feel right, and I don't think visual would add much. But they are, but again, like these are very specific circumstances. Just think it's a bit untapped right now.
Yeah. I think we're almost at the end of our time. What are the best ways for our audience to discover you and the work you're doing?
Yeah. So the first place to go is clockwise.ai, or getclockwise.com, but clockwise.ai is a little bit easier to remember. Find us there. You can start with Clockwise today. You can get up and running right now. It takes like 30 seconds. It's amazing. You'll get time back in your day. You should do it. It's free to start. There's no reason not to. But and then if you want to get into contact with me personally, always happy to connect. LinkedIn actually is where I post the most. You can find me, Matt Martin, Clockwise, and on basically any social media, I'm /VoxMatt, VoxMatt. You can find me on Mastodon, which I tend to post to a little bit. I'm a little bit on Threads, a little bit on Blue Sky, a little bit on X. Like the fracturing social ecosystem has not done well for me in terms of one channel, but LinkedIn's probably the most consistent.
Hey, OpenAI is supposedly coming up with a new version of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
To
We can
add
always
one,
change AI generated images.
yeah, Matt, this was a very fun conversation. Excited to see what Clockwise does next, and hopefully we'll have another time, you on another time as well to talk about it more. Yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a lot of fun.